Welcome to today's video, Malachi 3 verse 10 explained. Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, and prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven, and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. Malachi 3 verse 10 is one of the most quoted scriptures in discussions about giving and generosity within the Christian faith. To fully understand this verse, we must first explore the context in which it was written. The prophet Malachi spoke to the Israelites during a period when they had drifted away from following God's commands. Specifically, they had stopped faithfully giving tithes, which were offerings that represented 1/10 of their harvest and earnings, meant to support the temple, the priests, and those in need. God, through Malachi, is calling the Israelites back to obedience and generosity, urging them to return to their commitment of faithfully providing these tithes. This verse is a direct challenge from God to His people. It emphasizes two main things: the importance of faithful giving, and God's willingness to richly bless those who are obedient and trust Him with their resources. When God says bring all the tithes into the storehouse, He is speaking of wholehearted generosity, not holding back or giving half-heartedly, but genuinely trusting Him enough to give fully and freely. When God says that there may be meat in mine house, He highlights that the giving of tithes isn't simply about finances, but about provision. It ensures that the temple of God would have enough resources to continue worship, service, and support for those who are less fortunate. In other words, it's about ensuring God's work on earth can continue uninterrupted. But the second part of this verse is equally powerful. God challenges His people by saying, "Prove me now herewith." Essentially, God invites His people to test His faithfulness by taking a step of faith themselves. It is one of the few places in Scripture where God encourages believers to test Him, promising them a blessing in return for their obedience. When God says, "I will open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing," He is promising abundant blessings in response to obedience and generosity. The windows of heaven signify that blessings from God are limitless, far greater than any earthly resource. These blessings are not strictly limited to material possessions. They encompass spiritual enrichment, emotional fulfillment, joy, peace, and overall well-being. The promise that there shall not be room enough to receive it shows the extent of God's generosity. He promises to give blessings so plentiful that we cannot contain them all. It teaches us that when we trust God fully and commit to obeying His commandments, particularly those concerning giving and generosity, He responds generously, far beyond our expectations. Malachi 3 verse 10 isn't just about financial giving or prosperity. It's about obedience, faith, trust, and relationship with God. It calls believers today to trust God wholeheartedly, particularly in areas that may feel difficult or uncertain, knowing confidently that God keeps His promises and richly blesses those who follow His guidance.